Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. Amma ba'd. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Jazakallahu khairan, first of all, for the sisters at Aspire Psychology for hosting me today. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of their efforts for taking such important steps and measures and enthusiasm to host such an important topic, and a topic that's actually much needed in today's day and age. This topic of mental health and the whole psychology course that they are also launching. And I hope, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them successful. We can see already from the previous slides that there is a high student satisfaction with their course. So, inshallah, they've invited me here to share their platform today to talk a little bit about supporting mental health with a focus on teenagers, inshallah. So I believe that you've already had talks on supporting mental health, in adults and generally. So we are going to narrow down and focus on teenagers and children because these are the people that I primarily have the fortunate opportunity to work with as well here, alhamdulillah. So let's begin, inshallah, with the presentation. Start off with just remind ourselves what is mental health. And I'm sure lots of people are familiar with this, but just as a refresher and a reminder, let's just quickly recap what mental health actually means. So mental health is a state of emotional, psychological, and social well-being that affects, how we think, how we feel, and how we act as people. And why is mental health important in the first place? And why should we be concerned about it? Because it impacts our well-being, so it affects our quality of life and our productivity. So if we have a healthy mind and a healthy body, then we can be productive, and anything that we do in our daily lives, whether this is our work, whether this is our ibadah, whether this is looking after our children, whatever it is that we're doing, if we have a sound mind and if we're feeling healthy mentally, something that you actually can't physically see with your eyes, but if you're feeling healthy in that way, then inshallah it should have a positive effect on your life. What are the signs and symptoms of when, however, things go wrong, when we are suffering from mental health disorders? There are some general symptoms to watch out for. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, a lot of medical detail. It's just an overall recap. So we see cognitive changes, we see emotional changes, and we see behavioral changes as well. So cognitive changes means things like difficulty concentrating or making decisions and frequent thoughts of self-harm or harming others. Emotional changes could mean persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness and excessive worry or fear. And behavioral changes are things like withdrawal from social activities or relationships and significant changes in sleeping or eating habits. Obviously, these symptoms vary widely between individuals, and it doesn't mean if you're experiencing one of these symptoms that it's always a mental health disorder. This is just generic symptoms to watch out for. And also, it's really important to consult with a mental health professional for a proper assessment. But if you have or are feeling or are suffering from issues in any of these areas, and they do get to an extent where it's actually impacting on your personal life, your work life, your productivity, your life in your education, whatever it is that you're doing, then it might be a symptom that actually I need to get help and something's gone wrong. What is the stigma surrounding mental health? Now, this is really important before we carry on, that actually sometimes the reason people don't like to discuss this topic or don't like to seek help is because of the stigma surrounding it. First of all, what do I mean when I say stigma? The definition of stigma is the negative perception and prejudice society holds against individuals with mental health issues. So it is unfortunately something or a situation where if you say the word mental health, there's certain words or phrases or illnesses in certain cultures all around the world, different cultures, where immediately people have a prejudice or a stigma or a negative perception of that illness. So if you think about it, there's certain types of illnesses where if you say to someone, oh, I have this illness, they'll immediately be sympathetic. And they might say, oh, Allah give you shifa, and how is so and so, and they might come and visit you and they'll offer you sympathies. Whereas there might be certain situations, for example, mental health illnesses, where society will attach a stigma which straight away gives it a negative perception. And what's the impact of this stigma? It means it hinders individuals from seeking help. It can cause shame, social isolation, and a decreased quality of life. And unfortunately, this is something that exists. We see in society, people will sometimes cover up that they have a mental health illness. People will sometimes say they have something else instead of the mental health illness. People will sometimes fabricate entire stories instead of being realistic about what they've got, what the illness is. So this is why it's so important that we accept it for what it is, inshallah, so we can help the individuals. When this stigma exists in cultures or societies, what are the negative impacts of it? It reduces the likelihood of seeking help due to fear of judgment, and it worsens the mental health condition because the person will not then get necessary treatment. For example, imagine there is a young child or a teenager and they have depression, or they've identified that they might have the symptoms of depression. They might then hesitate to seek help. They'll refrain from seeking help for depression due to a fear of being seen as weak by family members or being judged by family members. So, if they go out to parties or social events or to visit relatives, for example, or if they're even studying, they might really refrain from telling other people what's wrong with them because of the stigma that's attached to it. They know that they're not going to get sympathy, but instead, people might make comments, negative comments, etc. And this is the huge negative impact of doing that. Now that we've talked a little bit about what mental health is and how it affects teenagers and a little bit about the stigma, what are the statistics of it? Now, this is important to understand why we're discussing this today and why it's really important to have courses and pursue knowledge in this area. Let's have a look at the statistics. I'm going to start with the global statistics just because I know there's people watching from all over the world. So the prevalence of mental disorders. So globally, 1 in 7 adolescents, that's young people aged 10 to 19, experiences a mental health condition. This accounts for 15% of the global burden of the disease in this age group, okay, according to the statistics, and these are quite recent from this year. Leading disorders. So, when we're looking at mental health, depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders are the leading cause of illness and disability among adolescents. Approximately 4.4% of 10 to 14-year-olds and 5.5% of 15 to 19-year-olds are affected by anxiety disorders, whilst depression impacts 1.4% of younger teens and 3.5% of older teens. Okay, so it's not just that the mental disorders, health disorders exist, it's the ones that from these, there's some that are quite leading as well. Finally, a very sad statistic, number 3, suicide rates. Suicide is the third leading cause of death in individuals. Astaghfirullah. So these are the statistics. It's not something that we're just talking about because it's a nice topic to talk about. This is when we're thinking about mental health in children, but in a global perspective. I'm going to briefly mention UK statistics just because that's where I'm from, and I know lots of people watching and listening today are based in the UK. Again, there's an increase in disorders. In 2022, 1 in 6 children aged 6 to 16 in England was identified with a probable mental health condition, which was significantly higher than previous years. And because of the COVID pandemic, the mental health of UK teens declined and had reduced recovery to pre-pandemic levels, okay, when research was done. And we know, obviously, the pandemic affected everybody in a huge way. Now let's come to India, just because I know, alhamdulillah, majority of our audience are from there today, and so are our hosts. So when we're again thinking about teenagers, thinking about the youth and mental health. The youth mental health scores in India, when we're looking at youth aged 18 to 24, is markedly poor compared to older age groups, regardless of income levels. And the average mental health score of young adults falls significantly below managing levels across most states in India. Secondly, when we look at the pandemic impact in India, similar to other global trends, the pandemic exacerbated and it worsened mental health challenges amongst Indian youth. And this was attributed to several things, and some of them are mentioned here: increased screen time, reduced in person interactions, and uncertainties about the future. And obviously, this was a very strange time for everybody, and it had a huge impact on our mental health, but especially on those who are from the younger generations, unfortunately. So, then let's talk about how we can help and support this group of people, okay? These teenage Muslims who are suffering from mental health conditions. Let's, as Muslims, turn, as we always should, towards Islam, turn towards the Quran. And in Surah Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear. And this reminds individuals that difficulties are proportionate to their capacity. And this, inshallah, should increase hope and resilience inside us. So when we are, as Muslims, reflecting on these Quran ayahs, here I want you to specifically think about how we can teach these lessons to our young generation, our teenagers, our youth, and also how we can support them taking from the Quran and Hadith, taking from the Islamic teachings that we've been taught. We should obviously be encouraging them always to turn to Allah for relief. And the famous ayahs in Surah Inshirah, which most people are familiar with: for indeed with hardship will be ease. Indeed, with hardship will be ease. And this verse reassures that, these verses tell us that the challenges are temporary. And after we suffer and after there are challenges, inshallah, it will then be paired with a time period in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send us with relief. So these are lessons that I would encourage everybody to familiarize yourselves with, first of all, but then also think about teaching them to your children from a young age, so that in the back of their mind they know these and they know what it means as well when it comes to seeking help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can we then help them seeking tranquility? So Surah Ra'd, unquestionably by the remembrance of Allah are hearts assured, and this tells us about the remembrance of Allah, of the mind and heart. And I always encourage listeners, in my weekly podcast, to always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, always do your adhkar, not only when things are difficult and hard and challenging, but also in times of easiness, when alhamdulillah you have blessings in your life and you're not worried about anything. And very, very important for parents and older family members to put these habits, instill these habits in young children as well. So when they get to that teenage age, in their general life, they are always remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They know that we are going to, as grown-ups, face trials and tribulations and challenges, but at least inshallah then they will be a little bit mentally prepared and also know what to say. They also know which du'as to make, which adhkar to make, and by then it should be a habit for them. Because if we're doing it as parents and as older people in society, the older generation, regularly with sincerity, then they should, through modeling our behavior, be copying us and doing the same thing, inshallah. So that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenges them in this way, that they are afflicted with mental health challenges, that at least they have this, I always say, toolbox available to them as Muslims, alhamdulillah, that they have the prayer, that they have the du'as and the adhkar that they can be making regularly, inshallah. Encourage them to seek treatment. The Prophet ﷺ said, make use of medical treatment, for Allah has not made a disease without appointing a remedy for it. And this hadith encourages us to seek medical or psychological help as part of one's faith. So as family members, or as people in society, as friends, as relatives, if you can identify or see that somebody is suffering from any sort of mental health issues, especially if it's gotten to the point where it's probably affecting them, it's affecting their productivity, as we mentioned earlier, or their sleep patterns, or their eating patterns or their work patterns, then it's our duty as a fellow Muslim, as a family member, as a friend to offer any kind of support that we can. And I'm not saying that you should all be professionals and know how to support them, but oftentimes the first step is to reassure the person. We are humans and humans are social creatures and we seek other humans for support. Okay, it's the way that we are wired. And Alhamdulillah, in India, you're lucky because you do usually have big family systems and that family support unit. And I know it's not always 100% the best for everybody. Allah make everyone's situation easy. Sometimes this is it comes with its own challenges. However, it means that we should be able to then offer that kind of support to each other. So if you are seeing anybody that's got any sort of mental health support, then or they need that support, then you can signpost them or say to them that it's okay. I can see that you're suffering, inshallah. I hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for you. But also, you can offer them mental support, you can offer them physical support if you can take them, if you can signpost them, if you know any appropriate doctors or whatever specialists that they can go and see. So we can offer them support in that sense as well, inshallah. But it's important, the main thing is not to ignore it. What is the reward for patience? This is something else that we can again teach our children from when they are much younger, not just when they are older or when they are suffering, but from a young age, about patience in general. So again, let's look at Islam. So here's a hadith in which it says, no fatigue, nor disease, nor sorrow, nor sadness, nor hurt, nor distress befalls a Muslim, even if it were the prick he receives from a thorn, but that Allah expiates some of his sins for that. Okay, so even if we experience any kind of pain or hurt, even if it's the prick from a thorn, it says, which I'm sure everybody's experienced at some point, pricking your finger in the garden or in trees or a bush or in a plant. And the pain, it's not really painful, but you'll get some sins expiated for that. So from a young age, we can teach children how important it is as Muslims to exercise patience. And a very easy and effective way to do this, something that we do here, is through prophet stories. That's a really good way of teaching them, because sometimes obviously people say, well, children are quite young and they're quite little and it might be hard to explain to them, or especially when people are suffering, people might say, how can you be patient when you can see someone suffering? But if this again is ingrained to them from childhood, that as Muslims, yes, we make the effort, we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have tawakkul on Allah, but we also should always be exercising patience all the time, inshallah. So letting them know that even though you are suffering, inshallah, you are going to be rewarded for this suffering, and just to keep seeking treatment and keep being patient and keep having that belief and that trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I will get better, inshallah, because we are humans and we are going to be tested. So this is again, as Muslims, a really important aspect to teach our youth and our teenagers to keep being patient. And again, the best way to teach this is by doing it yourself. Just if there is anything that you're being patient about in your life, not even necessarily related to your health, you can just keep reminding them that as Muslims, I'm going to be patient about this. We are going to, patiently endure whatever it is that we are going through. And inshallah, there'll be light at the end of the tunnel. So if you do this regularly through different times in your life, through different examples, then inshallah, the children will embrace this as well. And another aspect is self-care and rest. The Prophet ﷺ said that your body has a right over you. So this hadith encourages balance and self-care, which are essential for mental health. And I feel like this is really important, especially for teenagers and those of you who are young adults and studying, mashallah, because you probably feel like you don't get much time to dedicate to sleeping or to rest, even though you might want to, because you have so much going on in your life and you have so much revision to do or so much studies to do, you're otherwise engaged. But I would strongly encourage you, or if your parents, to encourage your children to get into really good sleep habits. And actually, sleep requirements change at different ages. So babies, children, they require different amounts of sleep compared to adults, compared to teenagers. And you're still growing, your bodies are still growing, your minds are still growing, and you're going through hormonal changes as teenagers. So it is a very difficult period of your life when you're going through all these changes, subhanallah. So it is very important to look after yourself, and one of those ways is by sleeping and looking after yourself properly. Because if you think that, especially during when times might be getting difficult, or during exam times, that I'll just sacrifice my sleep and I'll keep studying and dedicating all my time to my study, what will happen is you'll get burnout, you will crash, and you'll have mental difficulties because you'll experience overwhelm, and then you'll start being ineffective and stop functioning properly because you will have gotten to the point where you are mentally and physically exhausted. So I'm not just saying get sleep and it's nice to be able to get some sleep. I'm saying it because actually it's very, very important that you do get the correct amount of sleep, inshallah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, again, we're so blessed, already put for us, the night and day. And we know the benefits of that as Muslims, but also the prayer times. And one excellent way to manage your time is to manage it around the prayer time. So depending obviously where you are in the world, here, for example, in the UK, it's winter, so our days are very, very short and we get longer nights to sleep in. But wherever you are, plan your life around your salah. I say that a lot to people, but to teenagers, young adults, or even usually to adults, that if you do this, inshallah, you'll get some regularity, because then you'll make sure that you're doing your work, but you're having some leisure time, you're stopping for your salahs, which also count as break actually, and time to engage in your ibadah, and you're trying to look at it from a holistic perspective, inshallah. So that's another way you can try and keep your mind and body healthy, inshallah. Another one is just general self-care strategies. So stress management, so any relaxation techniques that you can do. So these are ones that just generally that they advise, but obviously look at the activity, make sure it's compatible Islamically as well. So whether that's stress management, whether that's physical activity, so exercise to boost your mood, to boost your health, breathing exercises if you know that you might start getting stressed. The most excellent thing, as I've already mentioned, as Muslims, is, I would say, is through the salah, because that's when you're actively taking out some time from your day to connect with your creator, to do a little bit of ibadah, and to just mentally refocus yourself. So if you can do all of these things and build yourself a routine, inshallah, it means that you're getting adequate sleep, you're having a healthy diet, and positive social relationships. These two are really, really important as well. So not just the sleep, which you've already mentioned, a healthy diet. How many of us can say that we eat healthy? Yet this is also related to our physical and mental health. You've got to make sure that you are eating properly. Okay, it's your duty to look after your own self, and this is one of the ways in doing that. Make sure you're getting enough fresh fruit, enough salad, enough water intake, especially for those of you who are students or studying and you might not think about this, and you might resort to eating fast food or processed food. Inshallah, make sure you do this. And positive social relationships. What does this mean? Surround yourself by good people, because you're a reflection of the people that you hang out with. So this is also good for your mental health, because if you're surrounded by good people who want you to do well, who are positive, inshallah, it makes so much difference. Because imagine things do get overwhelming and stressful, then you can sit down and you can talk to them about it. They can give you some positive advice because they mean well and they want to help and support you, inshallah, so that they can then in a way help you. They might not even realize that they're helping you. It might just be that they're good people generally, but it could be really helpful for you, compared to if you're really stressed and upset and anxious about something. Imagine you're sitting in a place where there's a few negative people and they're blaming you, or they're giving you unhelpful advice, or they're just saying things to put you down. That's obviously going to have a negative impact on your mental health, isn't it? It's not going to make you feel better. So inshallah, think about the relationships you've got around you. So I'm not talking about family, I'm talking more about friends, or even if it is family, like if you need to remove yourself from the situation, remove yourself from the room or from the conversation. But if you can surround yourself by good people who are going to be positive, inshallah, that is definitely going to be helpful for you. And then, inshallah, I'll conclude by talking about how mental health is a crucial part of our overall well being. And I just want to say that this is one of those things where um, you can't physically see it with your eyes. Okay. So, when it comes to physical health, you can usually see it. You can see if someone's hurt themselves physically, they've broken their arm or they've broken their leg, or they sit down and say to you, oh, I've got a headache, I don't feel good. But like I said, because of stigma or whatever reasons, you can't actually physically with your own eyes see when sometimes you can, when people are suffering from mental health issues. So just be aware that, try and be a supportive person, understanding that actually, if I am supportive and I am understanding of people who might be suffering from mental health issues, then inshallah it can make a significant difference in that person's life. And imagine, as a society, as an ummah, we do actually care that much about each other, that we would be happy to support our fellow Muslim brothers and sisters if they are suffering without being judgmental. And I'll conclude by saying that treat people how you want to be treated yourself. So God forbid, in the future, that you will be afflicted by these issues and you are the type of person who would criticize or be negative or hold prejudices against people who might be suffering. No, we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us good health. There are so many duas that we can do. And we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us the type of person that can be positive and positively impact and support anybody else who might be suffering, especially our younger generation who are still growing up and they seek support from us as adults, as the significant people in their lives, inshallah. And with that, I would like to conclude my talk. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. If you enjoyed this video, why not watch my next video on self-development for Muslims?